All right, you're listening to ALI-M.O.N.Y, Ali, Mayor of New York, ALI-M.O.N.Y, Monday, October 16th, 2023, from New York City. I think this is number 11, but who's counting? So, I guess right now it's a matter of me talking out loud to figure out what would the platform be, what would be the policies, and how do I move forward as mayor of New York or someone who would run for the mayor of New York. But again, I'm not really, I mean, again, not that I wouldn't do it. I would do it if it was thrust upon me, if it was a desert island situation and we all landed on a desert island and people said, hey, you do it. And again, I wouldn't even be doing this if I hadn't heard like a half a dozen to a dozen times in the time I've been in New York when I talk to people, usually cab drivers, that I should run for mayor of New York. I guess it's in the conversation we have and the way I speak, and all of a sudden they say, you should be mayor. And if you hear things enough, then you got to kind of look at them as clues from the universe. Again, I heard enough, you should do something with your voice. You should record. You should get into voiceover, which I have. And I enjoy doing, and there are a lot of people with great voices, and a voice is something that you're basically given. It's a gift. An accent is something that's kind of acquired. I speak the way I speak because of where I grew up in this country. If I'd grown up in Iran, I was born in Esfahan, Iran, then I would have a different accent. So the accent is acquired. The voice, I think, to some degree is genetic, where we get it from. As I said, Mayor of New York, my platform is simple: clean streets, safe streets, free streets. I believe everybody wants that. I think that's something that we can all get on the same page about. Now, if you don't want clean streets, it means you want chaos. You want problems everywhere. And I've seen some of the new ads for New York City's Clean Street campaign. There's an ad of a cigarette butt coming out of a collar, so like the head of the person is a cigarette butt, and it says something to the effect of, if you throw out your garbage, you're garbage. I don't think that's the way to get people to not litter. I think, again, my campaign's simple. Everything's either an act of love or a cry for help. So if you're littering, we hear your cry for help. How can we help? Can we help by having more garbage cans? Can we help by emptying the garbage cans? Can we help you by creating a container, a cool little Altoid box-looking container that you can put your cigarette butts in and then dispose of them in a garbage can? How can we help? But I don't think calling people garbage, I'm not even a fan of calling the garbage, garbage men, the men who pick up, and women. I've seen women do it too. When I see it, it is an oddity. It's something I don't usually see, but I'm very happy to see a woman also picking up the garbage. I don't think calling them garbage men, I don't know. I have an issue with that. It's like when you say some ethnicities and you just say their name, it sounds like you're being racist, but you're just actually saying where they're from. So clean streets, safe streets, free streets. Now, clean kind of speaks for itself. Let's pick up the garbage where we can and then wash your hands afterwards. I think we really, for many centuries, dismissed hand washing. Even in the medical profession, it's something that came later on in terms of a guy saying, and they were mostly men at that time, I don't need to wash my hands. I can just cut you open and stick my dirty hands inside you, or I can deliver a baby with my dirty hands. And we found out, no, you should probably wash your hands because there's these things called germs on them and bacteria. So it's better just to wash your hands, buddy. So clean streets is, we have to make an effort to make sure the garbage is picked up, and that's going to take a joint effort by all the people who have homes or businesses on a block. And I think the city has to turn around block by block. We just have to take a block and go, look, we have businesses on 29 between 6 and 7, our bar and our theater. And so we pay people to clean the streets in the morning and clean them in the afternoon. And then if I'm walking around, I'll pick up garbage as well. But we also need to make an effort to take these green mailboxes that are like holding stations for, I guess, mail and boxes of some kind. They're not like the blue mailboxes where you actually put a letter in, which I do believe is still a great deal. Look, what I like the price of a letter, of an envelope, not an envelope, but a stamp, although all of it's gone up, to still be lower. Sure. I'd love for it to be what it was when I was a child. I think I can remember a stamp down to 10 cents, maybe 15. but for sure 25. I mean, but it's edged its way up. I think it's over 50 cents now, but I think still that is a great deal. Whatever it is, as long as it stays under $1, and it's going to get to be $1. But to be able to write a letter, and not a lot of us do anymore, but to write a letter and be able for it to go to Anchorage, Alaska, or Key West, or I think even Puerto Rico or Hawaii, that's still a great deal, the U.S. Postal Service. And it's still a great way to create jobs, and someone has to do it. And I know they're touch and go. It's probably a tough business model to be able to deliver mail and packages. And you're competing with people who now jumped into the game in the 11th hour. By 11th hour, I mean the past 2 to 3 decades. People like your FedEx, your DHLs, your UPSs, doing similar things as the U.S. Postal Service. So they've got competition, but I believe it's worth saving the U.S. Postal Service and making each of the mailboxes and green bindle boxes, I believe they're called, making them outposts and canvases. So again, I think there's somehow we have to deputize people who have businesses and who have buildings to say, look, I know it's asking your super. Sometimes it's hard to ask for a favor, but there are people in every building who, to some degree, have to do the thankless work of taking the garbage out in that building. You don't want to throw another thing on their plate, and maybe throw them a few bucks to say, look, I'm going to get a can of paint. We're going to paint these green mailboxes. But I think people are afraid to paint the green mailboxes. Like, I see them literally right outside of a bar. You've got a green mailbox, and it's graffitied to the hilt. How's that going to make your bar look? I see, as I've said, this Italian restaurant got a green mailbox right beside them. It's all tagged up, stickers, graffitied, tagged. And I think there's a difference between graffiti and tagging. Graffiti, I believe people are trying to make art. Tagging is they're just putting their tag, their signature on something. And then I guess other people see it and go, that's that guy's tag, that's her tag. Although I would think most of the tagging is done by young men who are to some degree probably lost and looking for some sense of, I was here, I'm not invisible, immortality, or at least some mortality while we're here. But again, I would like to talk to them and say, let's figure out a way where you can take this tagging and take this graffitiing and turn it into painting homes, becoming a painter, becoming an artist, maybe calligraphy. You know, people make good money by doing calligraphy for people's weddings and events where they do it by hand. And if you're tagging or you're doing graffiti, you could probably be trained to do calligraphy. So I think it's redirecting what everybody's doing and saying, look, you're carjacking right now. You're doing it for what? You're making some money off of it, I guess. You want you like being in that car, even for a little bit. You're like, hey, I'm going to get to be in this car. Why don't we help train you to work with cars so that you can learn how to, you know, be a mechanic, sell cars, detail cars, clean cars, because obviously you like to be around cars. And I knew a guy once, very nice man. His whole business model was getting guys Ferraris who didn't think they could afford them. And I said, what are you talking about? Ferraris are like $100,000 vehicles. He goes, no, there's so many used Ferraris out there. Those Ferraris, you can get a Ferrari for 10 to 15, 20,000, sometimes less. And I was like, really? And he showed me. He pulled it up and he showed me all these used Ferraris. Like, I really, you know, again, I don't have a car of my own, but I do understand they are beautiful. They're ostensibly beautiful things. The shell, the color, the interior. And the ones that I was drawn to in my youth was the Jaguar XJ7, black. I loved that shell. The 67 Red Mustang convertible, loved it. The Wagoneer, loved it. But do I want to own it? Do I want to get a parking spot? Do I want to get insurance? Do I want to have more stuff that I got to think about? Because right now, where I am in my life, I'd rather spend my money on experiences than on stuff. So I'd rather travel, teach, perform, talk, photograph, and see people and see how I can help rather than I own this car. And especially in New York City. It's like if you own a car in New York City, you're dealing with a parking garage. You're dealing with the gas. You're dealing with insurance. You're dealing with, it's going to get hit because New York City is a contact sport. Whether we want to admit it or not, there's a certain amount of getting bumped around when you're on the subway, getting on and off the subway, getting on and off buses, walking down the street. And you have to be comfortable with a certain amount of light contact, bumping. I'm sure in other countries, and I've been to other countries when I was younger, the mass of humanity is far greater. There's way more people who are way more comfortable with contact, meaning bumped, pushing, shoving. You know, you don't want to get physical, you know, but I get it. I mean, I get it when all of a sudden the crab legs come out, the shrimp comes out, and you want to get some, right? I get it. We all love crab legs. We all love lobster. Maybe not. Maybe some people don't like it, but at some point, lobster was considered peasant food in Boston because it was so plentiful. Now it's expensive. Again, each one of these are modular, and I may repeat things, but the platform right now remains the same. And someone may say, how does clean streets, safe streets, free streets lead to better education? Well, if the schools that we have are surrounded by clean streets, safe streets, and free streets, and again, the clean street basically sums up itself. What does it mean to be clean? We know what it means. We know we're basically saying pick up the garbage wherever you see it, even if it's in the bike lane. We're saying let's paint the fire hydrants bright red, Technicolor. And again, I don't want to but you could have the city of New York say, look, Benjamin Moore, Rust-Oleum, Sherwin-Williams, we want to make you the official paint of the New York City fire hydrant. Who's going to bid? Now, there's an apocryphal story about Coca-Cola and Pepsi going to Disney to pitch which one was going to get the account for Disney. And they both came in with their pitches. We want to be the official carbonated sugar water soda of Disney. And they both came in with the attitude of, we're going to give you an amazing deal. We're going to basically put in our equipment for borderline cost. And then we're going to sell you the syrup for cost because we just want to be in Disney because we know kids are coming to Disney and we want to be the ones to brainwash them in the particular type of sugar water they drink. And we all know you're either Coke or Pepsi. Now, will you take a Pepsi when they go, we're out of Coke, all we got's Pepsi? You'll go, yeah, okay, fine. You'll do a Pepsi if you normally do Coke, and you'll do a Coke if you normally do Pepsi. That just shows you the power of advertising, that you're not going to say, you know what, never mind, I don't want a soda with my meal. Because with certain meals, we've been brainwashed to have a soda. And I guess you could, go a different way with a lemon lime, but you're probably going to, if they don't have a Coke, you're going to say, okay, to Pepsi. Well, back to the story. So essentially they both came in and they said, we're going to give you a great deal. And Disney goes, no, you don't understand. One of you is going to pay us to be at Disney. Not only are you going to set up the system, meaning the soda guns, the carbonation systems, the lines that are going to bring the sugar water and meet up with regular water and carbonate, and you're going to drop off your syrup for free. You're going to pay us to be at Disney. So no, we're not paying you anything. You're actually going to pay us to sell your stuff. Now, this story may be apocryphal. Someone may say that never happened, but it's interesting. It's interesting to note. But what I'm saying off of that story is someone can be the official paint of New York City. Benjamin Moore, Sherwin-Williams, Home Depot could come in with a bear paint. Solid paint. I mean, paint prices have gone up a lot. I remember when you could get a gallon of paint for $15, $20. Now, my gosh, we were painting for our recent project. You're talking $75 a gallon. Now, granted, you're getting, a certain grade of Benjamin Moore, but I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess you can get paint at Home Depot for $20, $25 a gallon, maybe a Glidden or a Bear, which to me are solid paints. I mean, you're looking for a fresh coat of paint. Someone's paying for the name. Yeah, you're probably going to go Benjamin Moore, and there's a primer in there too with some of them, so you may not have to paint twice. But I believe that we can repaint all the fire hydrants in New York City by getting somebody to become the official paint of New York City. And then you're creating jobs for the people going around and repainting those fire hydrants. And I think 343 of those fire hydrants around the firehouses that lost firefighters during 9/11 should be labeled with a plaque that says the firefighter's name and the day of their passing, 9/11, and be in the ground. So when you walk by them, you're reminded. Now, someone's going to say, of course, but a dog's going to walk by and they're going to urinate on that plaque. But, I mean, who but a firefighter would get a kick out of that? I mean, they would laugh. I don't think that's disrespectful. And I think the more reminders we can give ourselves that, you know, that we're just passing through, or that day we lost 343 firefighters, maybe that will give us a level of gratitude as we walk around the city to be more grateful, to kind of appreciate being here. Clean streets, safe streets, free streets. I'll repeat it because it's a platform. It's a simple platform. It has to begin. We got to get back to blocking and tackling. We've got to get back to basics, fielding ground balls and catching pop flies, ground strokes, basics. The basics are keeping these streets clean. So one of the ideas that I have is deliveries happen from 10 p.m. at night to 6 a.m. in the morning. Now, I know a lot of buildings are going to be like, we're shut down, our super leaves, we don't have anybody there to accept the deliveries. But one of the ways to get rid of the traffic in the city is to create this other shift. Now, again, the challenge is going to be finding folks, but I believe we need to create jobs. We got to look for ways to create jobs. And one of those ways is to make the deliveries that have to be made for businesses at night from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. There's going to be a lot of friction. There'll be pain points. Who's going to work at night? Who's going to be covering this? But it will be much easier to get 18-wheelers and trucks delivering items at night than doing it during the day. During the day, we want to free up the streets for the people who have to drive. You know, someone who is driving to work, or someone who is currying people around the city. And again, you know, that goes back to, and you'll hear the siren in the background, because I am recording in New York City. I live in New York City. I walk the streets of New York. I took a subway this morning. I'll walk to a bus this afternoon. I'll take that bus up 3rd Avenue. I'm utilizing mass transit best I can. Although, given a choice, I prefer to walk. Although I'm having some pain in the ball of my right foot. I don't quite know what it is. I've dealt with plantar fasciitis. That's not what this is. This is some kind of, I don't think it's a bone spur, but I've seen a doctor. He gave me some type of, you know, Advil on steroids. It's not steroids, but it's like a heightened version of an Advil or ibuprofen. He made me a foot pad, but you got to deal with your feet. So I'm 2 weeks of this, and then I go back, and maybe it's an insole. I don't know. But the other thing along with the driving, and you've heard these before, you know, I've advocated a odds and even day for those who don't drive for a living. Like if you drive for a living, you got to drive every day, right? So if you're a cab driver, this doesn't count for you. If you're, I guess, any TLC vehicle, Uber, Lyft, Via, Get, you get to drive every day. But a regular citizen is getting to drive without a ticket, either on a day that their license plate ends with an even number or an odd number. Now, at one point, it was all yellow cabs. And there was also black cars that you could call with the 777s, or ones who drove around and asked where you were going. Those have all become Ubers. Those have all become Lyfts. And by the way, I just watched the the series Pumped Up about the Uber. Very interesting how that happened. And it's really a matter of technology. Someone got to that technology where they can get to your phone, and you get an app in the Apple Store to Uber, and all of a sudden it completely changed the world of taxiing. And you hear the honking outside. That's a cry for help. You may not hear it, and I may hear it loudly, but you may barely hear it because I'm talking right into the mic. But magic wand, aliens coming down and telling us what we got to do to fix our world, I believe they would say one medallion, one human. Meaning previously yellow cab medallions would be bought by companies. And a lot of companies are doing that right now. Hedge funds have come in, I believe, and I've heard, and they're buying 50 to 100 medallions. And that's what a lot of people did throughout the years. If you were lucky in New York City, you got to buy a medallion. And the lowest I ever heard was from a man who said he paid $15,000 in like 1957. But at one point, pre-Uber, pre-Lyft, pre-Via, pre-Get, I had heard of people buying them for over $1 million. You couldn't get into a yellow cab in New York City without the driver initiating a conversation about do you know how much a medallion costs? And I'd say, yes, something over $1 million. That's right. They're over $1 million. I guess by association, it made them feel good that they were driving in a vehicle or something that cost over $1 million just to have the permission to drive around New York City. Well, then Uber came. Then the other ones came. And all of a sudden, the price of these medallions started going down. So instead of having conversations about, hey, did you hear about this Uber? We should do something. They just kept talking about the $1 million medallion. And then COVID happened. And, you know, in many ways, the yellow cab to me is the heart and soul of New York City. I mean, when you think of New York City, you think of the yellow cab. And the yellow cab has the potential to be the ambassadors of New York, the greeters, the welcomers. Because a lot of times when you first get to the city, you may be short of funds. But if you're flying into the city, most likely you're going to treat yourself to a yellow cab to wherever you got to get to. And then from there, you might have to, you know, do what you can to be dollar slice, although a dollar slice of pizza is not even a dollar slice anymore. Now it's like $1.50. But you'll have to look for ways to save money in other ways. But you may not take a train in, although some people may have no choice and they're going to take the train in from JFK or LaGuardia or a bus. And the price has gone up. Again, it used to be that I could get to from my home to LaGuardia for $30, tip included. That's no longer the case. And again, not to say that these prices shouldn't go up. These people are driving. They have costs. They have insurance. They have maintenance. They have medallion mortgages. They have home mortgages. They have families. So we all have to kind of deal with the pain of the prices are going up. But why? Could they ever stay the same in an ideal world? Or have we just inflated the prices to catch up with the inflation of ultimately, I guess it's the rent and the mortgages. But if the aliens came down, I believe they would say one medallion, one human, meaning one human being can own one medallion that they either drive or rent out. But ideally, the one medallion is owned by the person driving it or their family. So someone could own a medallion and they could drive it. Their son could drive it. Their daughter could drive it. Their cousin could drive it. But only one human being. And I guess I hate to say this, one social security number, because they really give us numbers to keep track of us because names can change, but it's very hard to change a social security number. One human being, one social security number, one medallion. Now, a family could have 3 sons and each of them could own a medallion. That's okay. Nothing wrong with that. But I think having the medallion be something that a garage or a company owes 50 to 100 of them is what's kind of gotten rid of the middle class that to some degree used to be the yellow cab. With 13,000 medallions, I believe that's what's in New York City, and 55,000 drivers, some driving part-time, some, you know, have their license but don't drive. 13,000 individually owned medallions would go a long way to solidifying a middle-class driver. And I believe, in a way, making them feel better. Now, how do you do this without people saying you're communist or you're socialist or whatever they're going to tell you? I mean, it has to be passed by law. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Canada does this. And not everything Canada does is great, but some things that Canada does is something that we should look towards in every country. We should look towards every country to see what is the thing they do that's the best and the way they approach it. And approach it that way because every country has a genesis, how it became a country, the path it took, the soul of a nation, what was that nation built on or around, and to some degree off of others. And every nation has a history, and we cannot deny the history of a nation or a body of land or a continent. This is your history. This is how you became this nation. And to some degree, we are capitalistic, and there's nothing wrong with that. As I've said, I'm a capitalist. I'm a conscientious capitalist, or I try to be. Or I acknowledge that idea exists of being a conscientious or conscious capitalist. I'm a micro venture capitalist, a micro VC, where I like to do little projects, whether that's, you know, writing a book and having it e-published, you know, instead of going the publishing route, or T-shirts, or hats, or other ways to do micro venture capital. capitalism. You know, small businesses I've tried. I've had as many failures as I've had successes, and I probably had more failures than I've had successes. And I think that's one thing that's important for a mayor to be able to talk to the small businesses, is to say, I feel your pain. I understand. I know what it's like to sign a lease and then lose a space. I know what it's like to put in a lot of money and thinking, hey, I'm trying to build something that, yes, it will cost a certain amount, but then maybe I get 6, 7 years of running the business, a revenue stream. Because every lease, you're not going to get a lease for a small-time business for over 10 years. It's just not going to happen. Maybe if you're a major company, maybe you'd get a 15 to 20-year lease if you're like a Staples and going into a place. But a small business, you're going to pay a security deposit, whereas the big businesses probably will not pay a security deposit. They'll simply be tied to that lease. Right on 2nd Avenue by Kips Bay Movie Theater, there's a Staples that's been out of business for 7, 8 years that's empty, looking for a sublease, because as I looked into it once, $80,000 a month was the rent, and they couldn't budge on that because that's what Staples had signed. So it's like this great place that could be so many things. I mean, any number of things can become pickleball places. I think pickleball is going to become so hot that like you can turn a lot of things into pickleball places, and I don't know, indoor kids gyms. I think those are solid businesses. I'd love to have a business called Puddles, where you come in your regular clothes, you put all your watches and phones away. It's an indoor puddle park where you get to step on puddles, you get rained on, you're squirting water on each other, and then you change into your PJs, and then you go home. But again, you got to think of creative ways to use all this space. There is so much office space that's empty out there, so much retail space that's empty. Some of it can be taken over by people who have big stacks. I mean, a lot of money, and they can try their idea for a restaurant, try their idea, but it doesn't always work. You go in with the best intentions, you know, your place can look beautiful, you can have great food, and you can still not get the customers because every line item is more than it used to be. Whether that's the line item for rent, insurance, electrical, phone and data, payroll, everything is more. And I think a mayor needs to be able to understand that. A lot of people, they pass these laws, the people who are politicians, and they've never run a business. They don't know what it's like to run a business. And I think along with that comes a lack of empathy. And really, small business is the heart and soul of changing this city, this country, and this world. I mean, most of business around the world, it's small business. It's a shed, a shack, a kiosk, a place where you, out of a little, you know, nook in a hallway, in a bazaar, are selling your thing, whatever that thing is. And people have to understand that, you know, without these, what do we have? Rolled down gates. Everything is some type of corporate entity. I mean, I got nothing against corporate entities, but they tend to have less heart and soul than something that's just actually run by a person or a family. It's just another line item. It's a spreadsheet to them. But as I said, a lot of the things I've said, I may have said before, but they're all worth repeating because, again, I'm trying to understand, you know, is this something I want to do? Is this a new chapter? Is this a reinvention in my life to be a politician? Or do I want to be a politician on TV, in a TV show? Or would I just like these ideas taken by somebody else and said, hey, I heard this guy's podcast and I'm going to take it and I'm going to say clean streets, safe streets, free streets. I'd go, great, please do it. Now tell me how you're going to do it and how I can help, because we're already trying to clean our streets, paint our mailboxes, paint our fire hydrants on our street, pick up garbage. We're already doing it, but how can you make sure each block does it? 29 between 6 and 7 is us. How are you going to make sure 29 between 7 and 8 does it? And so on and so on. As I've said, you've been listening to ALI-M.O.N.Y, Ali, ALI-M.O.N.Y, Mayor of New York. I try to keep these things under 29.59 because really, who needs it to be any longer? That's enough time to take a walk or clean your bathroom while you're listening to this or doing something else. I love New York. I hope New York loves me.